In this video, we review a Gallup poll published on July 28, 2026. The poll measures Democrats, Republicans, and Independents' attitudes towards the Supreme Court over time. Gallup asked, "Do you approve or disapprove of the way the Supreme Court is handling its job?" In this video, we review poll results over time. In August of 2000, Republicans and Democrats' approval of the Supreme Court was basically even. Approval from Republicans sat at 60% and approval from Democrats sat at 70%. That parity soon changed. In December, the court intervened in the 2000 presidential election. In Bush versus Palm Beach County Canvassing Board, the Supreme Court unanimously set aside a Florida Supreme Court decision that extended the deadline for manual ballot recounts. Then on December 9th, after the Florida Supreme Court ordered a new statewide manual recount of so-called undervotes, the Supreme Court voted 5-4 to issue an emergency stay, immediately freezing the ballot counting. Finally, on December 12th, the Supreme Court ruled 7-2 in Bush v. Gore that Florida's recount lacked uniform standards, violating the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Crucially, the court ruled 5-4 that no constitutional recount could be completed before the impending federal safe harbor deadline. This effectively handed Florida's 25 electoral votes and the presidency to George W. Bush. That burst of activity changed the public's opinion of the court, boosting Republican approval to 80% and tanking Democrats' approval to 42%. Partisan opinion of the High Court rebalanced in June of 2003, following the court's decisions in Grutter v. Bollinger, June 23, 2003, and Lawrence v. Texas, June 26, 2003. In the first case, the court upheld the use of race-conscious affirmative action admissions policies at the University of Michigan Law School. Then in Lawrence v. Texas, the court struck down state sodomy laws establishing constitutional privacy protection for same-sex relationships, pleasing progressive Democrats while offending conservative Republicans. The 2001 terrorist attacks caused Democratic approval of the court to steadily rise from its 2001 floor, even before the aforementioned 2003 decisions. Those events combined brought Democratic and Republican approval of the court together, with 59% of Democrats expressing approval and 57% of Republicans stating approval. Republican approval of the High Court soared between September 2005 and September 2006. John Roberts joined the court on September 29, 2005, replacing Chief Justice William H. Rehnquist. In June of the following year, the court ruled in Repanos v. United States to limit the federal government's regulatory authority under the Clean Water Act, a major goal for business-oriented Republicans. Months later, Samuel Alito took his seat on the High Court on January 31, 2006, following the retirement of Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. The inauguration of Democratic President Barack Obama on January 20, 2009, led to another partisan crossover. His nomination of Justice Sonia Sotomayor signaled a transition into the Obama era and triggered a sharp drop in Republican approval of the High Court. As the chart shows, Republican approval of the court began to decline even before President Obama's election. That was likely a result of Massachusetts versus EPA in 2007 and Boumediene versus Bush in 2008. In the first case, the Supreme Court ruled that greenhouse gases fit the Clean Air Act's definition of air pollutants. It mandated that the Bush administration's Environmental Protection Agency could not ignore global warming and had to regulate carbon emissions from motor vehicles. Boumediene versus Bush involved habeas corpus rights for Gitmo detainees. In a 5-4 decision, the court struck down a core piece of the Bush administration's war on terror policy. It ruled that foreign terror suspects held at Guantanamo Bay had a constitutional right to challenge their detentions in U.S. civilian courts. Republicans viewed the court as undermining national security, while Democrats favored the defense of civil liberties and international law. By August of 2009, Democrats' approval of the court rocketed to 75%, and Republicans' view of the court fell to 49%. The Democrats' euphoria didn't last long. The next partisan crossover happened after the Supreme Court's 5-4 ruling in Citizens United versus FEC in January 2010. The decision struck down corporate and union campaign spending limits, sparking widespread anger among Democrats and praise from Republicans. Democrats' approval of the court plummeted from 75% in August 2009 down to 46% in September 2011. In the same time period, Republicans' approval of the court climbed to 50%, closing the gap in the two parties' opinion of the High Court. Another divergence in the court's approval appeared between September 2011 and July 2012. The June 2012 ruling on the Affordable Care Act and National Federation of Independent Business versus Oyez triggered an immediate partisan split. Democrats' approval surged to 68%, and Republicans' approval plummeted to 29%, as conservatives felt betrayed by Chief Justice Roberts. Two monumental liberal victories in June 2015 delighted Democrats and deeply alienated Republicans. First came the preservation of the Affordable Care Act. On June 25, 2015, the court handed down a 6-3 ruling in King v. Burwell, upholding a critical component of the Affordable Care Act. Chief Justice John Roberts joined the liberal bloc to confirm that federal tax subsidies were legal in all states, effectively blocking a major Republican effort to dismantle the health care law. The next day, on June 26, 2015, the court issued its historic 5-4 decision legalizing same-sex marriage nationwide. In July 2015, Gallup found that 76% of Democrats and only 18% of Republicans expressed approval of the Supreme Court. Following the death of Antonin Scalia in February 2016, Senate Republicans blocked President Barack Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland, leaving the seat vacant for over a year. Then, the newly elected President Donald Trump nominated Neil Gorsuch to fill Scalia's vacancy, restoring the court's 5-4 conservative edge. In July 2018, longtime moderate Anthony Kennedy retired. Following a contentious confirmation hearing, Brett Kavanaugh replaced Kennedy in October of 2018, cementing a much more predictable conservative majority. Following Trump's appointments, the court delivered major legal wins to conservative groups. Key rulings included Janus v. AFSCME in 2018, weakening public sector unions, and Trump via Hawaii 2018, which upheld the Trump administration's travel restrictions on several Muslim-majority nations. The shift in partisan approval ratings moved with the changes in the court. A Gallup poll in September 2019 put Republican approval of the Supreme Court at 73% and Democratic approval at 38%. The partisan divide evaporated in the summer of 2021. A Gallup poll conducted in July found that the two parties' approval of the Supreme Court was dead even at 51%. To date, that was the last time Republicans and Democrats saw eye to eye in their respect for the High Court. 1 year later, in June 2022, the Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization decision overturned Roe v. Wade. This fulfilled a multi-generational goal for the Republicans and alienated Democrats. In June 2024, the Supreme Court overruled Chevron deference in Loper Bright Enterprises v. Raimondo. By striking down this 40-year-old doctrine, the High Court sharply curbed the power of federal regulatory agencies to interpret ambiguous laws, causing a foundational shift in how Washington operates and a major victory for conservative, anti-regulatory efforts. In its recent 2025-2026 term, the court further triggered partisan voters by upholding state-level bans on transgender athletes competing in women's sports. The ban was celebrated by conservatives and denounced by progressives. The spike in Republican approval of the Supreme Court to 79% in September 2025 was driven by a series of rulings that fast-tracked and upheld the Trump administration's policy changes. Following President Trump's return to office, the 6-3 conservative majority handed down several consequential decisions that aligned with the Republican platform. The court validated the administration's power to dismiss independent agency officials and backed the administration's termination of deportation protections for specific groups, including nationals from Haiti and Syria. Through the frequent use of its emergency docket, the court fast-tracked executive policy shifts, shielding the administration from lower court blockades and providing immediate wins for the conservative agenda. Republican approval later experienced a sharp 21-point drop to 58% after the court ruled against the administration on separate marquee issues like tariffs and birthright citizenship. Which way will the pendulum of partisan opinion swing next? It's hard to say. Put your thoughts and predictions in the comments below.
Oyez, oyez, oyez. All persons having business before the Honorable, the Supreme Court of the United States, are admonished to draw near and give their attention, for the court is now sitting. God save the United States and this honorable court.